for joining us. We'd like to welcome you to the first webinar of 2015, A New Approach to Financing Smallholders. I know many of you are curious about this. This is the elephant in the room, so to speak. Today, we have the great pleasure of welcoming Mr. Kola Masha. He is the Managing Director of Doreo Partners. And Doreo Partners is a social impact firm that brings unique business solutions to difficult development challenges like smallholder agricultural development. Just a bit about Doreo Partners before we start. They invest in early stage businesses to increase profitability of the agricultural sector, especially in Nigeria, but across Africa as well. They're very much driven by increasing food security and providing employment opportunities in a sustainable business manner. Kola, in particular, brings his leadership experience that is quite significant in the fields of venture capital, corporate finance, business development, marketing, and operations. And he's worked across 4 continents and for several global companies, including General Electric and Abiomed. You may have noticed as well, he comes with very high educational credentials with an MBA from Harvard University and a degree from MIT. It's just a real pleasure for us to have and an honor to have such an esteemed guest with us today. So I thank you in advance, Kola. So specifically today, Kola will speak to us about Doreo Partners' commercial agricultural franchise model called Babban Gona. And this model provides an integrative package of services to smallholders in Nigeria, including credit inputs, training, and access to markets. He will share with us what this model entails, the impact they've had to date, and where they are heading going forward into the future. Before we get started, we, as always, need to take a moment for some housekeeping. First and foremost, to ensure audio quality throughout the presentation, I would request everyone to mute their mics. When you unmute them, we have lots of echoing and ringing and it's very distracting for our speakers. So if you could be very conscientious about that. But don't worry if by chance you forget, we have someone behind the scenes that will mute your button for you. So don't feel like there's a spirit behind your computer. It is us muting your button. Now, to facilitate the Q&A, I would ask everyone to write your burning questions during the presentation. Do not wait till the end, because as a facilitator and the team here that's supporting me, it's very hard to collect and organize those questions. So please, during Kola's presentation, write your questions in the lower right-hand chat box, and we'll be collecting them and organizing them to facilitate our Q&A immediately following. So Kola will speak for about 25 minutes to 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A and wrap up. So I think that's all of the housekeeping. So without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to you, Kola, to begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the very kind introduction. So good morning, everybody. To begin, we would like to start by thanking all of our partners. Now, the reality is the work that we're presenting today, we're presenting that on behalf of the wide array of partners that we've worked with over the years that have enabled us to successfully create this agricultural franchise model. Without them, it would not be possible. Ba Awo, Ba Awo. Those are the words that this gentleman, Yahuza Amadou, yelled every time I come into his village. In the language of northern Nigeria, Hausa, that means no more hunger, no more hunger. The reason why Yahuza says that is because for the last 3 years, he's been a member of Babban Gona. And in those 3 years, Yahuza, his wife, and his children have not had to suffer the usual hunger season that is very prevalent in the region of the country that they are in. In the last 3 years, as members of Babban Gona, they've been able to access the capital needed to invest in their farms, get very good yields, and access markets that are able to get them great prices. This has enabled Yahuza to transition from really thinking about only the present to thinking about the future and enabling his dreams to come true. He's enabled his first dream, which is to buy cows, to come true, enabling him to diversify from being a crop farmer to also being a livestock farmer. So fundamentally, what we do at Babban Gona is we make smallholder farmers richer. We do this by first enabling them to attain yields that are up to 500% higher than the national average, attain prices for their products that are up to 37% higher than what they can achieve themselves, translating to increase in incomes up to 600%. Now, before we discuss how we do this, we need to understand why we do this. And to understand that, we need to answer this question. How did the terrorist group Boko Haram deploy dozens of personnel to kidnap 300 young schoolgirls in Chibok? The reality is this was a massive logistical effort. And the havoc that Boko Haram has been able to cause across northern Nigeria over the last several years has grown in intensity because they have the ability to mobilize an incredible amount of individuals, currently estimated at over 9,000 individuals. And they've been able to do this because the truth is, as oxygen is to a fire, so are unemployed youth to insurgencies. And in Nigeria today, we have a lot of unemployed youth. In the last 20 years, about 20 million youth entered the workforce. And as can be seen here in Nigeria's demographic curve, we have a very young population of 19. These 20 million youth that entered the workforce in the last 20 years triggered a dramatic rise in our general unemployment rate and youth unemployment rate. Now, with youth unemployment estimated over 60%. This has triggered not one, not two, but 3 different insurgencies, beginning with the Niger Delta crisis in the south, the Jos crisis in the center, and Boko Haram, most recently in the northern part of Nigeria. And what keeps us motivated is the reality that in the next 20 years, 4 times the number of youth, 18 million people, the population of Germany, will be entering the Nigerian workforce. So what we do to address this is within Babban Gona, we help smallholder farmers unlock the 2 key assets they have to unlock significant income. Those assets are land and their hard work. And we do this through a model we've developed called an agricultural franchise, where we effectively bring economies of scale to smallholder farmers. The way an agricultural franchise works is that we go out and we identify an individual, a person that we believe has the skill sets to be a great leader of a grassroots level farmer organization, we call a trust group. And to that individual, we provide them the requisite skills to form that franchise made up of smallholder farmer members. And once formed to that franchise, we deploy 4 services. The first is training on how to form the organization, run it effectively and efficiently. Secondly, training on how the members can migrate from a subsistence mindset to a commercial mindset, truly thinking about their farms as businesses. And then finally, training on how to become better farmers. The second service which we're here to talk about in more depth today is credit. We recognize that the ability to deliver credit to smallholder farmers was a very critical issue. And so we actually, before we kicked off Babban Gona, we actually spent 2 years thinking deeply about the issues around deploying credit to smallholder farmers, the risks associated with it, and coming up with a risk mitigation model that effectively de-risks smallholder farmers, which we call our 7 levels of risk mitigation. Once we deploy the credit, that credit comes 100% in kind through a series of products and services as agricultural inputs. And this really spans the breadth from farm analysis, really understanding the needs of that farmer, looking at their soil health, looking at pest pressures, et cetera, and then deploying those inputs, everything from high-quality seeds and other agricultural inputs to individuals that visit the farm and provide appropriate oversight and guidance, all the way down to harvest services, providing everything from the needle and thread that they might need. And finally, good markets. Providing a platform where the farmers are able to effectively deposit their grains, we collateralize that, get them a loan against that, and help them access good markets. Now, let's begin by understanding the individual that we're trying to provide credit to. So this is a typical young smallholder farmer in the region that we work with. His name is Yusuf. And Yusuf, really, he has no land title. He has no formal ID. He has limited cash. He doesn't actually have a phone he owns himself. His father has one that he gets to use every once in a while. He has no financial history and no formal address. So, if you want to finance Yusuf, what can you expect as your repayment rate? And it's these concerns that have really caused many financial institutions to really shy away from financing individuals like Yusuf. With the systems that we've developed, we've been able to create a system where we can finance individuals like Yusuf, and today we're running at a 99.9% repayment rate. As mentioned, getting them yields up to 500% national average, and through a system that is highly scalable, which we've scaled about 100-fold in the last 36 months. So before we go into the risk mitigation, let's understand what Yusuf's financing needs are. So a smallholder farmer in Nigeria typically needs about $1,000 per hectare. Typically needs that for about 18 months and can sustain about an 18% APR interest rate. The facility would need to come in 2 buckets, about 50% at planting, another 50% at harvest, helping them meet some of their cash crunch challenges. And the main risks associated with lending to these individuals really fall under 3 buckets. The first bucket is willful default. So the reality is in the environments that we work in, there's limited recourse for organizations to take in the event of a willful default. And so how to deal with these issues and ensure that you provide the right incentive structure is very, very critical. Because the reality is, smallholder farmer could wake up in the morning and just say, I'm not paying you back. And it does happen quite often. The second is diversion of funds. So the reality is the population that we are financing does not have a significant amount of capital. And they have a lot of needs. School fees, sick relatives, a lot of very pressing needs. And the reality is often what you find is that those pressures cause them to divert funds that are provided for business activity to these very important needs, but unfortunately needs that are unable to provide them the necessary returns to meet their obligations. And then the third is low productivity. And low productivity typically falls into two buckets. The first is low productivity due to farmer error. So farmers' inability to follow best practices to optimize their yields. And then the second is acts of God. So effects that are really out of the hands of the farmer, typically droughts, floods, pest disease, etc., etc. So recognizing these three key risks, how do we de-risk these smallholder farmers? So looking at our 7 levels of risk mitigation. The first level of risk mitigation is one that I'm sure many of you know quite well. So it's very effectively in microfinance across the world, and that is peer pressure. And it still applies the same way to smallholder farmers. The second is an economic incentive. So recognizing that it's important when dealing with this population that you provide more of a carrot than a stick, because your stick options are, quite frankly, very limited, if non-existent, due to the costs associated, et cetera, you want to ensure that you're financing a model that can provide them with the support that you provide, a strong enough economic incentive that they can earn enough money that they want to come back. It sounds simple, but it's a very critical part of your design on determining what you want to finance. The third are traditional guarantees that many of you are familiar with. They can be provided by multiple organizations that help to provide you that cover. And the fourth, and one of the ones we consider the most important, is recognizing that the crop that you're financing is the collateral. Smallholder farmers do not have access to traditional collateral, land titles, assets, vehicles, etc., etc. So in reality, your financing model needs to rely on the crop that you're financing to be that collateral. And you have to ensure you have a system in place that is able to ensure that that collateral is in good stead. The fifth is ensuring that you're able to mitigate for diversion of funds by providing in-kind lending only, amongst a series of other systems as well. The sixth, to manage the risk of farmer error, is to ensure that you finance a standard system. A system that you're very confident that your customer is going to be able to be successful at. And success, as said, is very simple. It's ensuring that you do the right thing, the right way, at the right time. And ensuring that the agricultural enterprise that you're financing has systems in place that ensure that the farmer is able to follow that pattern. I should mention that this is a very critical piece because it ensures, for us in particular, we've looked at key crops and developed key systems that will enable the farmers, as long as they follow a very set regimen, they're able to get very high yields. I think we're talking about some of our farmers, the national average in Nigeria for maize is about 1.5 tons per hectare. Our top performing farmers are getting yields of 7.5, 8 tons per hectare. Then the seventh is to mitigate against acts of God. And for this, the primary risk mitigation mechanism that we leverage is weather index insurance. We've developed the first in Nigeria, and we believe actually the first in West Africa, weather index insurance product that ensures that our farmers are able to have the necessary protection against climate change. Now the impact. The impact is quite clear. We've been able to create profitable small commercial farmers, getting yield, as mentioned, up to 5 times or higher than the national average. On the left here, you see a typical Babban Gona member's farm. On the right, literally, this picture was taken the same day across the street from this farm, and you see pretty much an average field that you can see of a smallholder farmer, maize farmer across the region. And I think the community that we operate in, I think the UNDP did a survey that showed that the average yields in this community back in 2005 were somewhere around 0.8 tons per hectare. Here you can see one of our team members in one of our farmers' fields. And this is one of my favorite pictures, and something that you do not see very often in smallholder farmers' fields. You know, the reality is when you see a cob of maize that is that heavy that it can't stand up, you know that that field is going to hit over 6 tons per hectare. This particular field in 2013 hit 6.2 tons per hectare. And in 2014, this same field hit about 7.5 tons per hectare. In closing, and looking at the impact, we can look at Hanatu Samaila, one of our Babban Gona farmers. On 1.1 hectares, she was able to obtain a net income of about $1,800 net of the credit that we provided to her, and has also begun to look to the future and thinking about how she can achieve her dreams. And her dream is to provide a future for her children. Today, we have 2,000 Hanatus. We expect to have 1 million Hanatus by 2025. That would enable 5 million people, our farmers and their children, to achieve their dreams. Thank you very much for your time. We're Babban Gona, and we grow dreams.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kola. I very much appreciate your presentation, as I'm sure everyone listening online has. During your presentation, we had several questions come in, and so I'd like to start the Q&A session, if that's okay with you.
Not a problem.
Okay, great. So, as I'm sure you're used to, you've presented your model widely and had lots of questions about that. Today, our participants and listeners were eager to hear more about the franchising model and to get your perspective on some features of that may or may not be in the model. So I have a first question here from Hedar Kotier. He's now at CGAP, formerly was working in South Africa with ABSA and the microfinance sector in South Africa. He says, looking at the 4 areas covered by your program, the setting and more, it seems that your clients probably need more financial services than just credit. Is this true, and have you faced that demand specifically from your clients, and are you taking any specific actions in this regard to expand the menu of financial services, like banking services, to them?
It's an excellent question, and it's definitely something that we are actively working on. We've been very fortunate that we have a very strong partner in First City Monument Bank here in Nigeria, FCMB, that really has been quite progressive in their approach and actively work to literally, I think, all of our farmers are through our program are able to access bank accounts now with FCMB. We're actually in the process of piloting a mobile money platform that FCMB has to provide to the farmers, as well as through that get them access to the full suite of financial services that is offered by a commercial bank.
Great. We also have some questions about the actual selection of the members and the model. A couple individuals have asked if you could speak about how the groups are organized. How do you handle the challenges of, when they're faced with an unfavorable offer by the market, how those farmers are selected and who in the group is doing the critical job. You mentioned some identification of a leader, but I think the audience would like to hear a bit more about that. And just related to that, myself, when you were speaking about it, I said, wow, how do they keep these farmers so cohesive? And if you could speak about, because there's many cases out there where farmer groups and in the development community, we've tried very hard to keep them cohesive and link them to buyers and markets, but it often falls apart. How do you ensure that cohesiveness?
Well, I think what we've realized is for a farmer organization to be successful, it really needs, first and foremost, the members need to see value for being part of an organization. And for that organization to be successful and for members to see value, really they need three critical things. The first is strong leadership. If you go back, I'm particularly a huge fan of history. If you go back and study, and we've had the opportunity to go back and meet with several of the large farmer organizations that started back in 1910, 1915, so on and so forth, in the U.S., and really trace what are those key characteristics that enabled them to be successful and grow and become really today leading farmer organizations. There's three characteristics. The first is a strong leader, an individual that is a farmer leading fellow farmers that can provide that cohesive leadership. The second is access to professional management that can provide efficiently and effectively all the necessary services to the membership that enable them to be successful. And then the third is really around enabling them access to investment to scale their business. No smallholder farmer wants to stay at 0.3 hectares. If they have the opportunity, they want to be able to leverage their profits and lease more land and grow and become more and more prosperous. But however, they need to be able to access the requisite investment to scale that. So the nature of the agricultural franchise model is such that we focus on identifying those leaders, those individuals that have the skill sets that we believe will make them great leaders of the grassroots level farmer organization, and to them bringing those two missing pieces. That is the professional management that can deliver services efficiently and effectively, coupled with the requisite investment to enable their organization and their members to scale. So it all begins with that leader. And we've looked at this very, very critically. Over the last 3 years, we've actually developed a psychometric test that looks at a wide array of characteristics and of individuals. And we've deployed this test actually quite extensively. Last year alone, I think we've had about 9,000 smallholder farmers take the test. And through that, we've been able to refine our selection process and identify individuals that we believe would be those great leaders. And then once we do that, I think with support of several of our partners, we've been able to develop a training platform we call our Farm University that really is a very intensive training platform that we provide to these leaders that gives them not only the skills to select the appropriate people in their group, but also the requisite skills to manage and lead and provide that support to their members to enable them to have that level of cohesion.
Great. Thank you, Kola. I have a lot of questions coming in on people interested in very specifically on how you're providing the inputs out to all these farmers. Can you explain the operational structure? How are you covering your cost in your with an 18% APR as your interest rate? in your speech, I was struck by the very detailed analysis of why, the challenges you face as a lender on the demand side, but there's also those challenges that all banks and MFIs face that precludes them from going out there in rural areas. It's because it's so darn costly. So can you speak about these issues, speak about your operational structure, how you deliver those inputs, how you're covering all your costs of your operations? I would ask you to be as forthright as possible. Perhaps you're having, part public support on this and private support. Can you give our audience an indication on these issues? Thank you.
Sure. I think I think we all know that reaching this target population can be very, very expensive and often prohibitively expensive. Often you find models that can scale to a certain level, but because they rely on a subsidy, they are unable to scale beyond that. So as we look to develop this model and address this challenge, we recognize that we had to create a model that was sustainable and highly scalable, because the problem we're trying to address is very large. As I mentioned, we have 80 million youth coming out into the workforce in the next 20 years, and as an organization, we've targeted that we will create that through businesses like Babban Gona and others will create somewhere around 10 million jobs by 2030. So scale and sustainability was at the core of what we wanted to design. So if you look at models that reach the BOP, typically they have two key characteristics. One is that they are a very low margin, low cost model that they have to reach millions and millions of people to become sustainable. The second is that it's a higher cost, typically higher margin product or service, and then they can sustain on a relatively small number of people. We wanted to find something that really was at the intersection of that with the agricultural franchise models. We were looking for a model that was basically would deliver a service that was very high value but very low margin. And so that's really what we've created in the agricultural franchise model that enables it to be sustainable. So credit is only one of the multitude of services that we deliver to our members. So for each individual member on a per hectare basis, we deliver everything from their credit to their agricultural input needs, as well as playing a role in their marketing of their produce. So we have multiple revenue streams that enable us to have very large revenues per customer and be able to sustain with a very low margin on each of those different revenue streams, because on an aggregate basis, the margins add up.
So
that's an inherent part of the design of the agricultural franchise model.
Just a clarification then. So in addition to the interest rate on the credit, the farmers are also paying for the other services?
100%.
They are. Could you explain what the payment is on the training, for the inputs, for the market access services you provide?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
I was just wondering if you could go a little bit and delve deeper into the cost structure of the fee structure of the other services in addition to the credit. Mm-hmm. I understand. I apologize. The inputs were on credit, but the other services, do the farmers actually pay your company or for the market access, for the training, or how are those folded into the 18% of the credit rate?
So the credit is a separate business. So you've got the credit margins that we make from deploying the credit to the farmers. And then we work very critically to develop systems in which we're able to access as cost-effective, sustainable credit as we can. So we're able to deploy that at a reasonable margin. Mm-hmm. Then all the inputs, the seeds, the fertilizers, et cetera, all of those, because we're able to aggregate demand for that on such a large basis, we're able to get relatively low costs for all of those things and able to tag on a margin that still enables the farmer to access the products more cost effectively than they can themselves, yet we're able to capture a margin on the inputs. And then for the marketing services, typical agents will charge relatively large commissions for helping them market. But once again, we have the economies of scale that enable us to market that product for our farmers and basically charge a very, very small commission that enables us to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And at this stage, do you have someone is asking if you would be able to reveal your return on investment that you've realized to date? Are those figures public, or you're reaching a percentage of sustainability? I guess the respondent or the participant is trying to understand how close you are to sustainability, commercial viability of the model, and its replicability elsewhere.
Sure. So from day one, the business has been able to attain an operating margin, a positive operating margin. That demonstrates the sustainability of the business, meaning that we can deliver the services to the farmers and cover our costs and get a margin. Now, with any business, you have to hit a certain scale to now amortize some of your fixed costs. And that's where we are as a business right now, where we have been rapidly scaling to be able to effectively amortize the associated with running the business. And we expect to hit that inflection point in about 2016 timeframe.
Okay. So today, if you had to give a percentage, sort of, you're covering operational costs, but to what extent you're fully covering, amortizing all your fixed costs? Do you have a percentage?
Fully amortizing our fixed costs?
Yeah, to become fully sustainable, as you said, you anticipate that.
Basically, we hit an inflection point of full sustainability at about delivering services to about 5,000 hectares. So currently this season we'll be delivering services to approximately 3,000 hectares. So by next year we'll exceed that, and at that point in time would be self-sustaining. Okay,
great. I have a question. You mentioned FCMB as a commercial bank in Nigeria, a very important player in the agri-finance market there, and you mentioned them. One of our members of the audience has asked if you could explain a bit more who are the other financial institutions you're engaging with, and what was the criteria, for you selecting them, and how did you get them to accept or be interested in your program?
Well, I think for us, the reality is that the challenge that we face in Nigeria, and I think it replicates itself across the continent, is that often traditional commercial banks look at the agriculture sector and look at the risks, the perceived risks, and the costs of going in there and the returns, and don't really see it as a viable place to focus on. What you want to do is you want to look for a partner. And that's one of the key things we looked for as we looked at financial partners. You're looking for a partner that as part of their growth strategy is to bank the unbanked. Because what we provide is really a very cost-effective system for commercial banks that have a strategic focus on trying to bank the unbanked to leverage. Because basically, by dealing with one partner like us, we're able to get them thousands of new customers, individuals that they literally would never have had the opportunity to reach. And so that's a key characteristic you want to look at from that standpoint. Now, as far as other commercial partners, the reality is, from a commercial banking standpoint, we exclusively work with FCMB.
Okay. The individual was interested. They felt like with less than 2,000 participants, perhaps the financial institutions may not be interested in that yet. Have you faced that in your discussions with them?
Well, it comes down to the confidence they have. Because when we approached FCMB, we had like 100 farmers. So they took a gamble on us and said, would you have the ability to scale rapidly and reach the target that we're looking at? And so we were able to convince them, and we demonstrated through results that we could scale very rapidly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions coming in about your lending methodology, and if you lend to, well, first and foremost, how do you determine the individual needs within the group in terms of finance? What are some of those, challenges you faced in that identification in terms of the credit demands of the group vis-a-vis the individuals and repayment and all that, the typical problems we face in group lending? And then a follow-on question from someone else is, does your model afford the opportunity for individual farmers? Maybe you have some emerging farmers there that, have different needs than the group.
So I apologize, I didn't quite get the first question, but I can answer the second one. The model that we have, we've done a lot of work around our risk mitigation strategy, and really we try to keep it focused. So we do not give loans to individuals.
You do not. Okay. I guess the first question was on how are the individual needs of the group members in terms of finance determined?
Got you. So what we do is, an individual farmer may have 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 fields. And what we actually do is we determine the individual needs on a field level.
Okay.
So we go field by field, and I'm trying to understand what the credit needs are at that field level, and then aggregate that to the individual, and then aggregate that to the group.
Okay. So those are the needs to get the seed in the ground and fertilize and all the operational needs of cultivation.
Exactly.
Okay. And does it also include the cost of marketing and harvesting?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There have been some questions here too on the staffing needs of your firm. Can you speak about how that's set up to run this outfit? How many staff you have, and what are the requirements in that regard?
Gotcha. So the staffing requirements, it's a very operationally intensive business, as one can imagine. Because you're delivering all these services to hundreds of farmers across a relatively large geographic area, and so the reality is that we actually are still refining that to ensure that we have the optimum level. So over the last 3 years, our staffing structure and management structure in terms of has actually gone through several revisions. So we don't really at this point have a fixed model yet on the staffing side.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak a bit about what your infrastructure and your human resources are that in the field to be able to support the operations of this very service-intensive, inputs and advice being given to the farmers and checking on their activities, et cetera?
Oh, most definitely. I think the model is really, at the end of the day, the model hinges on the ability of our field officers. So we have dozens of field officers that are out there working with the farmers in the field throughout the season, visiting those farms, providing advice, providing guidance, going to their homes often, and providing. We train these field officers really to have a very broad skill set of not just providing advice and guidance to the farmers on their farming needs, but really looking broadly across their other success factors of the franchise.
Mm-hmm. And what could you give the audience a characterization of the typical profile of that field officer, and approximately how many of them do you have on your staff?
So the profile actually varies also quite significantly. We look for more characteristics of an individual versus particular qualifications, so on and so forth. Because we've had individuals that basically are have barely a secondary school education to individuals that actually have bachelor degrees play a role there. And we really, for us, key success factors are obviously around their ability to communicate effectively to the farmers. Really, at the end of the day, that's one of the key characteristics that we look at. Right now, on our we basically all in all today have field officers about 68 at last count.
Mm-hmm. And do they, there's some questions coming in here on this very topic in terms of, are they, from our audience, they're mainly from financial institutions, are these individuals like a typical loan officer? Are they making the loan decisions, or is that left up to the group to make the credit decisions? Are they just there to verify the information and the size of farms and that? If you could give an indication of where they fall on that spectrum.
Unlike microfinance, that's financing multiple types of businesses and so on and so forth, that I think traditionally the loan officers often have that level of autonomy. Mm-hmm. In our scenario, we're financing a particular type of business, and so once the franchise is approved within certain limits, the credit to all the different members is granted. So the field officer is more just checking that all the basic criteria are met.
Okay. So this is a very highly standardized model. You're not going to have a specialized lending unit that needs to go in depth and credit analysis on them. You're relying on the principles that you spoke about to mitigate those risks that we all know very well. I just had a question myself. When you call it a franchising model, it conjures up ownership in that. Do these franchisees own? What is the ownership structure? And is it a business entity? Do they have to be registered or any form in the country, or is that more of a loose term that you use to call that model?
The reality is, if you think of it as what is the business of a Babban Gona Trust Group? Effectively, what it is it's these farmers it's a group of individuals coming together and effectively creating a joint venture that says, for this planting season, we are all going to pull these resources together. Mm-hmm. and manage it in a certain way and so on, and share the profits in a certain way. So what the owner is basically the leader of that trust group, who has the ownership over deciding who they want to be part of this joint venture. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, a very interesting model. I'm sure we could spend another good hour asking you lots of maybe prickly questions, so to speak. But Kola, I wanted to thank you for your presentation today and your openness to field all of these questions. I'm sure that our attendees may want to follow up with you directly on specific matters relating to that. We look forward to hearing more about Babban Gona going forward. There's a lot of optimism on my part. I'm sure that's shared for many people online about your approach. So very good luck to you and your team on the ground. I know it's not an easy endeavor, but it's impressive. At this time, I'd just like to say thank you again to Kola for his presentation. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. I apologize again for the technical snafu at the beginning of this webinar. We usually do pride ourselves on being very timely, but 5 minutes after 22 webinars is not too bad. I'd like to ask everyone if you would stay online and take a minute to let us know what you thought about this webinar. It really helps myself and the AgriFin team to improve the quality over time. If you have any remaining questions, please do visit our website or send us an email, and we'll make sure that we facilitate that with Kola. Also, one last announcement. We are gearing up to be putting online several tools and resources that have been coming out of our 11 technical assistance projects with financial institutions in Africa and Asia. We're very excited for this showing, mostly first and foremost for you and your businesses, because these are tools and resources that have been piloted and tested and are showing some excellent promise in helping commercial financial institutions improve their outreach in agricultural finance space. So please do look for that in the coming weeks. So just lastly, everyone have a wonderful day or evening wherever you may be. On behalf of the entire World Bank AgriFin team, I'd like to again thank Kola Masha, our esteemed guest today, for contributing his knowledge and his experience in this space. I think many of the lessons and the takeaways from this webinar will help to catalyze other questions and development approaches. So once again, thank you for taking time out in your very busy schedule, Kola. And with that, I'll be signing off, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, or hearing from you at the next webinar. Thank you.